but I got lost there. But it's an honor to meet you too. Just week I was circulating your brief on boards, and now I know I can get now free access to all that training. Dr. When I grow up, I want to be Dr. Patricia Mukami. Thank you so much, Chairperson of Clean Start. Thank you so much, everyone. Allow me to adopt the protocols, but also just take note of the leadership of the Kenya Prison Service. Bwana Mwakazi, who rightly said we have worked together for many, many years. Indeed, I think you'll be a doctor. Dr. Mwakazi was very instrumental in providing leadership and learning from Malawi on prison paralegals, and that's how the first wave came. And I really appreciate the prisons because they were bold, they were open, and they were daring to open the prisons for prison paralegals, because there was no, and there still is, no legal infrastructure for prison for paralegals in prison. So we used to say it is an extra legal infrastructure. I also want to recognize probation and aftercare, Bwana Okech, who again we've also worked for many years together and on issues of bail and aftercare issues, and many also daring acts of probation and aftercare. And I'm very happy to see probation also represented here. Diaconia, I can see Diaconia is represented here by Irene. Again, thank you very much for being part of supporting this whole conversation in terms of the prison reform, because prisons are really the melting point of all our challenges and successes in this country. If you want to really know where our country is at, just walk in and around a prison and you know where we are. So thank you very much. Teresa, thank you very much for inviting me here for this. And it's always an honor to interact with you and also to interact with former incarcerated. That word bothers me. That's why I'm unable to complete it. And I know we've had discussions with Teresa. I don't know where she's seated. That we need to develop language. We have to develop positive language and not call ourselves former incarcerated, persons. Yes. Just like the way we are able to speak, you've been somewhere, like the way I'm referred to as Commissioner Emeritus. We can appropriate the name Emeritus and dignify ourselves, because it's very important that the right to dignity is respected and protected. Strathmore. When I grow up, I want to possibly graduate in my PhD from Strathmore. I am very, very impressed by the fact that Strathmore is a pioneer, is an innovator. And Madam Jane, we really acknowledge you, because again, Strathmore does things that are unusual, but are breaking ground in respects to matters, human rights, and for today's purpose, issues around the criminal justice system. A gentleman called Bernard Kirk said, going to prison is like dying with your eyes open. He was a footballer, and it does feel like that. And allow me to tell you my story. When I was about 15 years old, I've never been to prison, I've never been incarcerated, but I have been to prison. I've walked and worked in prison. But when I was about 16 years old, and I just thought about that when I was coming here. During my days, there were only 2 telephone booths, if you are lucky. One near the bar. The bar, I don't think it's the bar we are talking about here, near the bar, yeah, which was usually a broken system, and the other telephone booth was at the chief's camp. And at the chief's camp, that telephone booth always worked, and of course you know why. One evening at around 5:35, my senior friend, a friend of mine we grew up with, said we need to make an urgent telephone call. Something had happened. I was around in Form 2, and you know the blood in a Form 2. I was courageous, so we left and ran to that telephone booth before it was dark. So we must have arrived there maybe 4:45, something to 6 o'clock. And she made the telephone call. But while we were making the telephone call, we had a whistle, but we continued with what we were doing. Then we were there, then we had some men come and rough us up at the booth. And we were asked the usual rough questions of a security officer. Kwa nini mko hapa? Nini ni akina, you know, and the like. We were so scared, two small girls, very scared. Maybe she was a year or two ahead of me in terms of age. And immediately we were whisked from there and put in a chief's cell. Then there were places of detention. So then I in a prison. And we stayed there for 2-3 hours until around 8 something. That is when someone came to our rescue. We did not know why we were there. It is only when we were released, and I thank God that some people had seen us and we had said we are going to the chief's camp to make a telephone. That's when our parents came looking for us. Our crime was making a telephone call when the flag was being lowered at 6 o'clock. How was I to know what that whistle meant? I only know a whistle in football and in games. We were in for that long. And when I look back, I say we were so lucky. You can imagine if we stayed there until midnight, what would have happened to those small girls. I don't think I would be standing here today. But that experience in being in the chief's camp for those hours in a cold floor, scared, not knowing what wrong you had done and what to do, still lingers in my mind. So I can imagine what it means for very many petty offenders. On behalf of the Witness Protection Agency and on my own behalf, I really take this opportunity to be part of this great occasion as we launch this report on Rethinking, the Bar Research Report. When I see the word bar, it resonates to the profession I serve, because we talk about the bar and the bench. Those are the practitioners, the lawyers, and the judicial officers. And I appreciate being part of the bar through the membership of ICJ, Madam Julie, and also FIDA Kenya, who have played a significant role in this country to ensure that justice is not only done, but it's seen to be done. I'm also glad to be part of this momentous occasion as it jogs our mindset to create a paradigm shift with regard to how we perceive inmates and convicts in the justice system. Gone are the days where you would not identify yourself as someone who has served in prison. If you went to a meeting and asked, how many of us have been in prison? No one would lift their hand. Yet we visit prisons, we pass by prisons, some of us live next to prisons. But the thing that gets into our mind is, you're talking about who has ever been convicted. So I'm a criminal. So even after you've served your term, you're still a criminal in the eyes of the people. More often than not, we see innocent people arrested and convicted for crimes that they never committed. They suffer mental torture, they lose their self-esteem, they lose their families, they lose all their rights and responsibilities to their family. I therefore take note and really celebrate that, Teresa, your story is a story that we use, and the stories of others, to celebrate and also to challenge ourselves on the difference we must make. And I want to quote what Teresa said, that what I didn't see come my way was the women and children who I spent time with and shared space with, women who had been imprisoned for crimes of the system, the corruption that requires a fall guy, good, so that the person who is responsible could go free. A broken system that routinely vilifies the vulnerable, the poorest amongst us, people who cannot afford to pay bail or bribes. It is true, we have a broken system and we must fix it, and that is why we are doing this. I really celebrate you, Teresa, for taking the fall, but also for rising to be counted. Your story resonates with that of Nelson Mandela, who said, in my country, we go to prison first and then become president. In this country, we can say, in our country, we go to prison first or get detained, and then we become policy activists, human rights defenders. We celebrate you. Your story is indeed touching and epitomizes the tribulations that inmates and convicts go through, especially where their rights are violated and the rights of their family members. The launch of this report is therefore a wake-up call to the justice system and to add to the focus on us refocusing and addressing these issues. I'm therefore very proud of the fact that the National Criminal Justice Reforms Committee, I think that's what it's called, it's a long name, has taken up this issue of rethinking our criminal justice process and procedures and penal reform infrastructure to change it for the better. Indeed, as we launch this report, I think it's also important for us to celebrate the fact that the chairperson of that committee, Justice Grace Ngenye, was yesterday sworn in as the judge of the Court of Appeal. It therefore means these matters will not only be tackled at the magistracy and the High Court level, but when we go to the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, we are sure that there is going to be reform. There's going to be reform in the prisons. I also want to recognize the fact that Clean Start, I think, sabotage, right? As a social enterprise, we recognize the fact that, thank you very much, that this is better. Renee, huh? That you have a special focus on women and girls. And this is very important because this is the backbone of this nation. In terms of percentages, the women and the youth especially, which includes the girls, are a big number in this country. And you're building those bridges. And I want to encourage Clean Start to continue in that trajectory and also link with the other institutions that were mentioned earlier, like Legal Resources Foundation, which also, I think was in 2015, did an audit on the criminal justice system that has informed that criminal justice committee and continues to inform us so that we can equip the women and girls leave prison. I believe that the launch of this report will add to the concerted effort in the criminal justice reform system and facilitate access to justice and administration of justice to women in this country. The outcome of this report should help all of us as legal practitioners, academicians, and I think Strathmore, we look forward to how this can be integrated in the teaching in the faculty, and also improve on how we process women in the justice system. A trade unionist, Eugene Debs, said this, and this is very important to appreciate why, as we were provoked by Dr. Patricia, that you can't live here the way you came in. And this is what he said, and this I agree, that where there is a lower class, I am in it. Sorry, not where there is a lower class, I am in it. Where there is a criminal element, I am of it. And while there is a soul in prison, I am not free. And in this respect, when there is a soul in prison, who should not be in prison because they are petty offenders. And for me, where I stand, petty offenses means 3 years, the misdemeanors 3 years and below. And we have Article 49, which is very clear in terms of saying if you have an offense of 6 months and below, if you are to be convicted for 6 months, you should not be in prison. So long as those souls, the 72% plus, are in our prisons, then we are not free. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to refocus a bit in respect to the mandate that I stand on. That is the Witness Protection Agency. It is an agency that focuses itself within the criminal justice or the administration of justice, and it's an independent agency, and some of you or many of you may not have interacted with it, but you may have contributed in one way or the other. It was the Act came into force in 2006, and the purpose is to provide a witness protection program and to provide a framework, a procedure, and provide special protection services on behalf of the state. And these special protection services are provided and given to persons with important information who are at threat or who are their lives are at risk and or are intimidated. But these individuals have stood up and cooperated with the prosecution and other law enforcement agencies. And therefore they come under our care for us to protect them. This agency is premised on issues of confidentiality and covert operations so that we are able to protect those witnesses. You may ask yourself, how is that relevant to the discussion today? It is, because some of the witnesses that are protected may not be petty offenders, but they are persons who are incarcerated and in prison. Because the program supports, and we call them, and that's why language is important, we don't call them people who are in prison or incarcerated. We call them justice collaborators. We work with justice collaborators in prison who have important information and are ready and willing to cooperate with the prosecution or other law enforcement agencies to provide evidence and preserve the evidence and support them to do that. Therefore, the launch of this publication is very important because in the prisons, we have prisoners, women too, inmates, who may be justice collaborators or who have cases that are serious of child trafficking or drug trafficking, murder, and may come under our ambit. And we have supported those kind of cases. Therefore, as we launch this report that has a significant contribution to the criminal justice system, the role that we play, each of us as agencies, both state and non-state is very, very important, and we need to coordinate and promote the multi-sectoral approach, and I like the aim because we also have multi-generational impact with a multi-sectoral approach that involves all of us as players to achieve very tangible results. Working together is therefore very powerful, and we can be able to create the positive change. Let us work very closely with the Kenya Prison Service. They have reliable data. They have reliable data, and it is data that can speak to us and inform our criminal justice reform measures. As you know, I think in the last discussions, if there are 72% petty offenders in prison, and each of them then before inflation took a toll on us, were spending 220 shillings per day. How much are we spending today on the petty offenders? How can we use that money to restock our prisons in a different way and plow back to the community and prevent petty offenders from seeing the prison gates? Lastly, as I end, I want to echo something that started many years ago at Legal Resources Foundation. I don't know whether the director of LRF is here. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Well, yes, Karibu. I'm Director Emeritus, LRF. Many years ago, when this issue of petty offenders started at Legal Resources Foundation, actually LRF was the pioneer of this conversation, and that's why they provided leadership on the audit of the criminal justice system. And we worked very closely with the Kenya Prison Service to do the RRI to accelerate issues within the to decongest prison. I think the first RRI was about decongesting prison. LRF did a lot of work, and one of the things that it came up with is there is need for us to have a small claims court. And today we have a small claims court. It may not be structured the way the thoughts were, but that's a beginning. But in the process of that, it was discovered. Anyway, you never discover anything, but that's a colonial term. It was noted that many of the civil matters had a criminal element. And that criminal element, a lot of it was petty and at times serious. And they realized you can't run a small claims court without a court of petty sessions, which is where petty offenses need to be processed and fast-tracked. So we need to rally together and reclaim that information to fast-track the establishment of a court of petty session, which should be a 20 or 4-hour court. You know, the courts like Judge Judy and the other. A court of petty session would ending, and I am. Will not be served until those who are unaffected, and most of us fall in that category, are as outraged as those who are. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected. For us, This may be a story, it may be statistics. But those who are affected are already outraged, right? Emeritus? Until we are all outraged, justice will not be served. So we must be outraged. And I'll leave you just like we ended with AIM. I'm going to end with my own aim of WPA, because those are our initials. And remember, WPA in this conversation, W meaning women. Let's protect our women, because from them we be and we become. They nurture us from birth. P, let us protect them. Let us prevent the injustices that. And A, let us acknowledge them in the practice of the administration of justice, and let us use this body of knowledge to assist them, so that we are able and we do protect and respect the dignity. And once we respect the dignity of women, we respect the dignity of all of us. So God bless you, and thank you very much.
Well, I think she deserves another round of applause, surely. Come, my strong young men, help me to move this lectern over here to the side. And as I do, Teresa, please stand up. Please walk down the aisle. Please come to the stage. Teresa, really quickly. Yes, you. She had not done this. No, I want you to put it over here because our next speaker will need it here. Come to the stage.
Does she need a mic?
The rest of you, empty your hands. Hands free. Hands free. Warm your hands. You stand here. Warm them. Don't rush this. There's that saying, if you get lemons, make lemonade. Or people of after 4 p.m., you know where you put the lemons inside things which start with G and others with T. We shall not mention them here. All of us go through life with a capital L. Know when life happens. When life just comes around the corner, it checks on the list, and it's got you on the top. And then we get to choose what we get to do with the circumstance that has been created of us. She and Jane, where are you? Genoma, come. And Sippy, come. And Priscilla, come. Who have I missed? Jane Guge. Jane, there you are. Sarah Odima. Fatia Jasho, Fatia Kamero, I know I saw Fatia. Betty Kay. Who I missed? These women, of course, these women got life with capital L, just like your life has happened to you. Divorce, death, tragedy, whatever it is. As you hear your name, come to the stage. Vivi. London. People of London, emeritus, you know yourselves. But I want to put these, turn off your laptop for a while, or this, so that we don't have that light at the back. Turn that off, please. So that you can see these women. And you can see in them I didn't see you this morning. How are you? You're here, indeed. Hugs to continue. These These women chose that they would not be written off. Hold the clap, Faith Lutti. These women chose that being silenced in the moment would not be being silenced forever. That their past would not dictate their future. That what may have been personal to them was going to be what they were going to use to create a change that will be continental and beyond. These women have got stories of meeting at Uhuru Park and sipping one Fanta amongst themselves slowly. And don't sip a lot, just like slowly. And sharing a cup of coffee in a restaurant as they discuss how they're going to get themselves off of their feet. No, out of the grave that we as society had dug for them, saying to each one of them, you do not belong to society anymore. We refuse to allow, to see, to hear you. And they said, hold my drink. That was then. For a quick minute, I want you to think about your own circumstance in your own life, the people, the places, the things, the times, the events that have invited us to a conversation, to a celebration, to a change of a system we don't even think or talk about. And they've said, even though that hammer comes down and that sentence and that bus comes, those people are not the living dead, those who are buried with their eyes open, who are forgotten, who are halfway between life and death, who are treated as though they are a waste of time and energy, whose budget allocation, whose opportunities, whose families are ostracized often with them. They've said, out of that experience, we want to make a change that the future may be different from the past. These ones. And they're inviting us to this conversation. Dr. Pat asked the question for you to think about. Why does Sweden and other Nordic countries, why are they reducing their prisons? They're not foolish. They know something. Prison has not reduced crime. Prison hasn't reduced crime. We're just under 50,000, I think, persons in prison right now. Today, the count might be about 47 or something of this nature. There's no reduction. Tonight you might get mugged or someone you know. You're holding your purse like this. It hasn't reduced, and we've had almost 60 years, 70 years of prisons. They realized something. They did a quick calculation and realized this. If we reform and rehabilitate them, if we prevent the crime, if we have alternatives to justice that allow them to continue to be in society and to work to resolve their issues, we won't get mugged. It's called enlightened self-interest. If we're going to reduce crime, we're going to need to shut the prisons. Read the philosophy behind it. Don't just look at the beautiful pictures of what the prisons look like. Read the philosophy behind shutting down prisons. And understand that the invitation that we are being called to is not the invitation to close prisons. It's the invitation to live in a society where you can walk with your glasses, your handbag, talk on your phone, where you can send your child to the kiosk and not panic, where And for those of you who have parents old enough, you will have heard these stories. You can actually go to the shop, take the milk, leave the money, take your change and go back. And the shopkeeper isn't there, because we once had a society like that, not very many generations ago, 3 generations ago. My mother tells those stories. And they're saying it's possible, but they can't do it alone. They need you. So have you warmed your hands? Yes, excellent. Hold on. This is an exercise. Just go slowly, the commissioner. I said we're amongst friends. Your job, ladies, is to acknowledge where you've been, who you are, that you are more powerful than the past, that you are stronger than your circumstance, that you have a calling that is bigger than what is currently happening to you, because I know life is still happening to you. And to allow, you know that place where you usually close, you just put like Suraya Kazi? To drop that for a moment and allow us to celebrate, acknowledge, see, and honor you. I'm moving this because I don't want you to be hidden. Stand here. That is your job. Fair enough? Now stand. This is, pick a factor. 10. 7. 7 for perfection. 7. Your job is your hands should hurt, your palms should be red. You should be doing this by the time we're done. Yours is to absorb, to allow, and to own. Ready? Thank you for who you are. You may be seated. Up next, I want to invite Dr. Emmanuel Wanyonyi. This gentleman and his team did all of the hard work for the report that you now have. Has everyone received a report yet? Is there anyone who does not have? Have we distributed them, or are we waiting until they leave? Let me know. Okay, put your hands up. Put your hands up if you have not, and we will be coming around and giving you the reports. Please, a round of applause for a gentleman who we asked, no neza ongeza, no lipata, and he was just gracious and kind, together with his team, to give you this beautiful report that you now have. A round of applause for Dr. Wanyonyi as he comes up. And if you don't have the report, keep your hand up until someone comes and gives it to you. Thank you.
Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Firstly, greetings to all of you gathered here today. I'm absolutely excited on my own behalf and on behalf of the research team to be here this morning. It's been a long, long journey, but one that was very exciting, very satisfying. And this is a culmination of that journey. And we are very, very thankful to Clean Start and all partners involved for affording us the opportunity to conduct and present the findings of this research titled Rethinking the Bars, Access and Administration of Justice for Women Who Commit Petty Offenses. So we have convened here this morning to critically engage on a matter that has been a great challenge, not just in Kenya, but also around the world. And if you will allow me the liberty of imagining that the majority of us gathered here today have directly or indirectly come into contact with the justice system in our country. And that may also be by default or by design, due to reasons that are best known to ourselves. And it therefore means that we all do have different levels of knowledge of the justice chain process, be it arrest, pretrial detention, or sentencing in our criminal justice system. It's also very encouraging to have listened to the speakers who have come before me. I've learned quite a bit from what they have mentioned. And one thing that struck me is the fact that for a very long time as a society, we have been an audience to the divergences that continue to inhibit access and administration of justice for members of vulnerable groups in our society. And it is for this reason that I also join the speakers who have come before me to congratulate Clean Start and all partners on making this research possible. And by doing so, increasing women's access to justice and generally advocating for women's equal rights, opportunity, and participation. So I would like us to go straight into the report. I am not going to go through all the details, and I'm very happy to see that you are already looking at the reports. I believe that makes my work easier. I won't have to tell you these are the figures and whatnot. And I'm happy because also within the context of this presentation, I will not be able to, for instance, point out some of the numbers that are very meaningful to us in the context of what we're discussing here today. But in the process of this presentation, you can be able to look at the numbers and also be able to draw your own conclusions. But it has been widely documented that criminal justice systems from across the world and are not adequately gender responsive when it comes to protecting the legal and human rights of women that are in conflict with the law. And this is despite the United Nations specifically recognizing women as a particularly vulnerable group. So in the current environment of the criminal justice system in Kenya, the rights of women who commit petty offenses cannot be fully guaranteed due to such cross-cutting issues as gender, income level, and poverty. And we were very happy to be able to look at some of these cross-cutting issues or intersectional issues. And these are the kind of issues that actually influence the decisions taken by law enforcement and judicial officers throughout the justice chain. So, according to Section 36 of the Penal Code, petty offenses are known as misdemeanors or lesser offenses that are punishable by a fine or a jail term, not exceeding 2 years, or a fine or even both. And these petty offenses, I would like to just list some of them. And I know that causing a disturbance or nuisance, and the other one that was very prominent throughout this report, loitering with intent to commit prostitution. We can move to the next slide. So there is a common perception that the needs of women who commit petty offenses require little attention compared to the needs of those women who commit felonies. And it has been noted earlier on, and this is according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey of 2018, for example, that a large majority, that is 72%, of convicted female prisoners in Kenya were sentenced to prison terms of between 1 month and 2 years. So since the majority of these women who commit petty are economically marginalized, they tend to experience inconsistent and divergent law procedures that then lead to the violation of their rights. So in this regard, it also bears to note that there is a relative dearth of research specifically concerned with access and administration of justice for women who commit petty offenses in Kenya. And this view is also strengthened by Jeffries et al., who observe that studies undertaken on incarcerated women, particularly in Africa, are limited. Furthermore, Atabey 2014, in the Handbook on Women and Imprisonment, states that there is need for studies to be more attentive to female criminality, which is also reinforced by the fact that women constitute a vulnerable group in prison due to gender. Consequently, the current study contributes to the acceleration of actions and policies in Kenya to increase women's access to justice and nurture a responsive justice system. Because as I stated earlier, most of the criminal justice system, not just in Kenya but around the world, are adequately gender responsive. And the purpose of this research, to be able to nurture that responsiveness within our justice system, and then to safeguard women's rights. The study also aims to advocate for the implementation of non-custodial sentencing for women who commit petty offenses due to circumstances that are noticeably different from those of men. I can move to the next slide. I will take you very quickly through the objectives of the study. The first one, it was to identify the legal standards and procedure that law enforcement officers apply in the arrest and pretrial detention of women who commit petty offenses in Kenya. And then secondly, to establish the cross-cutting issues that law enforcement and judicial officers should consider when administering justice to women who commit petty offenses. Then thirdly, it was to assess the implementation of the available guidelines on arrest, detention, and sentencing of women who commit petty offenses. And lastly, to determine the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms that should be applied when administering justice for women who commit petty offenses. Let's now move to the methods. So the present study used a broad variety of empirical methodologies, including survey, phenomenology, and with specific reference to the lived experience group. We also had the key informant interviews and document analysis. So the study was guided by the concurrent triangulation mixed methods design, which was tailored to expose the gaps in the Kenyan criminal justice system concerning women who commit petty offenses. And the choice of this triangulation design enabled us to the study to obtain different but complementary data on how women commit petty offenses, and more importantly, how they go about accessing justice within the justice system. So to begin with, I will talk about the survey. And the survey population consisted of a predefined group that was drawn from 18 women's prisons from across 10 counties in Kenya, namely Nairobi, Machakos, Murang'a, Nyeri, Narok, Nakuru, Embu, Kiambu, Migori, and Mombasa. And the study also included the formerly incarcerated women that were recruited from the Coalition of Formerly Incarcerated Women, or COFU. As of 2020, the total population of sentenced female prisoners in Kenya was 3,700, or 13% of the entire prison population. And that is the population that was accessible for some, because the survey data was collected in 2020. So we had to rely on the figures that were available as of that time. and those figures were 3,700, plus 10%. So we used that figure, 3,700, and based on it, we calculated the sample size, and we used Andrew Fisher's formula, and we ended up with a sample size of 385 participants, working with a 95% confidence level, a standard deviation of 0.5, and a confidence interval or margin of error of plus or minus 5%. We also recruited members of COFU, and the population available at the time was 200 formerly incarcerated women, and so based on Fisher's formula, we arrived at a sample size of 132. So that means that in total, the sample size for the survey was 517 respondents. But remember, as I've said, the data was collected around 2020, and that was the height of the pandemic, as we all know. So due to COVID-19 control and prevention protocols, at the time of data collection, it was impossible to access the entire desired sample size. And therefore, we had to come up with a convenient sample of 190 participants. Turning now to the lived experience, I was still on that slide, so I'm just talking about the methodology. I want to talk a little bit about the lived experience, which was very exciting to us as a research team. And you cannot have an opportunity such as this to, interrogate what's going on within the criminal justice system with reference to women who commit petty offenses, not listen to the voices of the women themselves. And that then formed the choice of this research tool. It is a phenomenological research tool, and it's called the Lived Experience Group. And so with this particular approach, the idea is to be able to capture the structures of consciousness of the life worlds of the participants. And so in this case, the women that were available to us were interviewed, and we were able to understand from a second person point of view what they went through, the kind of experiences they had while they were in prison. So that was to establish the effectiveness of guidelines on conditions of arrest, obviously at the beginning, then pretrial detention, and then also sentencing. And so in the end, we also have I think it's back. So I was talking about the lived experience group. When it comes to phenomenological research, the focus tends to be on the richness of the data that is collected, which is obviously more meaningful than the actual size of the sample. So we decided to go with the commonly used sample size in lived experience group research of 10 participants. And now the data in the lived experience group was collected, as I said, from a second person perspective through interpretive phenomenological interviews. And the purpose of that elicit the participants' narrative in light of what was meaningful for them while they were in prison, which is then an essential component of lived experience. In terms of key informant interviews, the survey respondents and the lived experience group participants were less able to provide the legal perspective of access and administration of justice, and it was therefore necessary for the study to rely on key informants who could provide information about the participants' experiences of the justice system. So the sample size for the key informant interviews was 15, and the sampling technique was purposive. So we had 15 purposively sampled key informants that included lawyers, magistrates, human rights defenders, police officers, and prosecutors. Document analysis is also very important, and this really did help. Of course, when it comes to triangulation, you have to use a different tool to be able to make meaning and perspective of the available data, and therefore we had to use the Constitution to begin with, and also regional and international legal instruments as tools to be able to triangulate results from the KIIs, the lived experience group, and the survey. So if you look at the report, I have listed all the regional and international legal instruments that were accessible to us. And I want to say that as a research team, it was even easier for us to be able to understand the results based on the explanations that we drew on these documents or legal instruments. Now, the analyzed documents included the Constitution, as I said, and the purpose of using document analysis as is the case in research is so that you can be able to corroborate the results that you have, or you can even be able to elucidate or expand these results across different data sources. And again, it is important because you want to avoid bias. You may not be able to entirely eliminate bias, but you want to guard against bias, and that's the reason why we had to rely on these policy documents and legal instruments. I think with the data analysis plan that is now on the next slide, for the survey, we used COBO Toolbox for data collection and analysis. And for the lived experience group, the KIIs and the legal instruments, we were able to analyze them through interpretive content analysis, which involved identifying themes, categories, and codes, so that we could be able to understand how women in particular access justice. So let's now move quickly to the key results of the study. And first, it's important to report that we collected and analyzed data separately, as is the case with the triangulation design. And we were able to produce 4 sets of findings. And then later on, we combined quantitative and qualitative results to be able to gain a more complete picture of access and administration of justice for women who commit petty offenses in Kenya. Now, the process of data analysis involved generating sufficient themes, categories, and codes that relate to issues of access and administration of justice, especially from existing literature, international and regional legal instruments, as well as policy documents. And these are the themes that we were able to identify through that particular process. The first one, guidelines on conditions of arrest, where we derived 3 categories, including types of offenses, cross-cutting issues in access and administration of justice, and procedural guarantees and the rights of arrested persons. Number 2, or theme number 2, decisions on pretrial detention. We were able to generate 2 categories, namely length of detention and conditions of detention. Then lastly, number 3, the theme on sentencing guidelines. We were able to generate 3 categories, including sentencing hearing, determination of the sentence, be it custodial or non-custodial sentence, and lastly, alternative sentencing. Therefore, the results of the study, as you can see presented in the report, follow that particular order. So I'm going to focus on the key results, but you're invited to interrogate all the results in the extended report. The first result, okay, is that the study confirmed that low-income women, who also happen to be the sole breadwinners of their households, are more likely to commit petty offenses. But it's also important to note that while the criminal justice system has to take concrete measures to protect the legal and human rights of these women, in the process of dispensing justice, as is required by the Kenyan law and existing international legal instruments, it was observed that there was partial compliance with the guidelines on the conditions of arrest in reference to the types of offenses that were committed by these women, and it was a major contributing factor to the increasing number of petty offenders, especially in pretrial detention and by extension in prison. You can move to the next slide. So number two, the results also revealed that a significant majority of female petty offenders were not notified of their rights, and the procedural guarantees were not applied in a way that ensured that the accused persons that were brought to trial were protected from the violation of their rights and freedoms. Also, important to note that for the majority of the respondents, bail was set at an exorbitant rate such that they were unable to afford it. And that is something that is worth ventilating upon. And I believe that there are measures that are already in place to make sure that happens. On a positive note, that is in the next slide, according to the results, the Kenyan justice system has done relatively well to improve the conditions of pretrial detention, especially in terms of reducing the length of the time that is spent in pretrial detention as required by the Kenyan law and the international legal instruments. And then number four, the next slide, the justice system has also largely adhered to regional and international guidelines and practices in the treatment of prisoners in relation, as you can see there, you may not be able to see very well, but it is in the report, to hygiene, healthcare, nutrition, family support, religious observance, and provision of educational facilities. So this speaks to the incredible work that the Kenya Prison Service is currently doing in that regard. However, the results also revealed that there were significant cases where the rights of accused persons in pretrial detention, especially in pretrial detention, were violated. So if there's an area that needs improvement, it is in it's in pretrial detention. Number five, that is the next slide. When it comes to the sentencing process, the results revealed that a custodial sentence is still the most preferred form of punishment for petty offenses in the Kenyan criminal justice system. And it also emerged that the interpretation of the law is varied among legal practitioners, law enforcers, and judicial officers on the legal standards and procedures that should be followed in the administration of justice for women who commit petty offenses. So let me then quickly move to the key recommendations of the study. The first one, since this study has revealed that the majority of women who commit petty offenses are either illiterate or semi-illiterate, the criminal justice system in Kenya should constitute a framework that enables women in conflict with the law to know their human and legal rights. That is from the point of arrest, pretrial detention, and sentencing. Number two, the study calls for the decriminalization and or depenalization of petty offenses, such as loitering, hawking, and other livelihood-related offenses, which, as the respondents noted, should no longer be in the statute books. Then number 3, the study recommends the completion of the revision of the Criminal Procedure Code, the Penal Code, the Prisons Act, the laws relating to county licensing laws and regulations, the decriminalization of civil matters, and the anti-counterfeiting laws, amongst others. Another important result that I haven't talked about that emerged in this particular research is the fact that very many women that we interviewed indicated that they could not afford legal representation. They could not afford bail and whatnot. Now, if you think about it, the Legal Aid Act of 2016, which establishes a legal institutional framework to promote access to justice and legal aid services to vulnerable groups, including poor or needy persons, and that also includes women who have been noted by the UN as members of the vulnerable group, should be fully implemented. So the implementation of the Legal Aid Act of 2016 should be implemented in accordance with the law. And it's also important to state that the available legal aid services are still inadequate and cannot cater for the majority of needy women who commit petty offenses. The next slide. Pretrial detention policies should also be gender responsive. And as we noted in the results, that is a big area of improvement. The criminal justice system must recognize the special needs that women in conflict with the law could have and include them in the policies. And for the policies that already exist, there should be proper implementation and an accountability mechanism to measure the success of that implementation. So what generally these results reveal is that implementation is still a major issue. We have very interesting ideas. We have the support of various legal instruments, but when it comes to implementation, we seem to be slugging our feet a little bit. So that is an area of concern. Now, number 6, considering that Section 176 of the Criminal Procedure Code enjoins the court to promote reconciliation to parties in a misdemeanor, the justice system should accelerate the training of mediators and the increased accelerated operationalization of ADR in court and at police stations for nonviolent petty offenses and poverty-related crimes. The study also advocates for the institutionalization of petty offenses courts within the existing framework of the criminal justice system to be able to ensure that petty offenses are tried under an accelerated and simplified procedure for the greatest possible efficiency of the judicial process. Number 8, the Kenyan criminal justice system should also fully implement, properly disseminate, and this was important to note, especially with the key informant interviews. They said with the SPGs or the sentencing policy guidelines, they're already there, but there's a problem of dissemination, that the SPGs have not been properly disseminated. And so this is something that the criminal justice system should look into, not just fully implementing the SPGs, but also properly disseminating, and also there is the issue of monitoring these guidelines. Additionally, the justice system should adhere to the regional and international laws and standards in an effort to overcome practical difficulties in their application. Number 9, it is necessary, that is in the next slide, to have a probation and aftercare service department that is adequately funded and properly staffed, because if that happens, it will take women who commit petty offenses, especially off the hands of prison officers, hence easing congestion in prisons. And that's a big problem, not just in Kenya, but across the world. And in connection to this particular recommendation, Some of us are aware that the CS for Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, has in the recent past championed the redirecting of prison officers to become probation officers. And as such, this study calls for the institutionalization of this framework to bolster the probation and aftercare service department. Lastly, the Kenyan justice system should take seriously, and I quote, this is a quote from one of the key informants, take seriously, so they're not my own words, take seriously the process of reintegrating the formerly incarcerated women into society, and another important thing, to promote restorative justice between these formerly incarcerated women and their families, between these women and the complainants, and also between them and the community at large. I would like to conclude this presentation by just taking note of one strength of this study and one limitation. I'll start with the strength of this study. So what you'll appreciate when you read this report is that this study represents a comprehensive examination of the whole in reference to the rigor of research, as with the use of quantitative and qualitative research instruments to be able to expose the existing gaps within the Kenyan criminal justice in terms of women who commit petty offenses. Essentially, what we were able to do through this study was to follow through the entire justice chain process, from the point of arrest to sentencing, thus then improving the validity of the results. And so we could have chosen to just pick one area. Let's say we could have chosen to deal with conditions of arrest for women who commit petty offenses. Or we could have focused on the pretrial detention or the sentencing guidelines. But what you appreciate about this study is that we actually look at the entire justice chain with reference to women who commit petty offenses. That's one of the strengths. But there's also a limitation. And this limitation, as I mentioned earlier, is tied to especially the survey, which I mentioned, the data was collected in 2020. And the limitation here is attributed to the COVID-19 prevention protocols that were at play during the data collection phase of the survey. And I said that the desired sample size was 517 respondents, but in the end we ended up with a convenient sample of 190 participants. The upshot of this, though, is that it was difficult to find significant relationships from the data, and that, in one way or the other, limits the generalizability of the survey results. Nevertheless, the choice of the triangulation mixed methods design compensated for the apparent weaknesses of the survey methodology. In the words of Scripture, as I conclude, let us continue to hold firmly to the hope that we confess, for he is faithful, he that promised. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
I think for the sleepless nights and the very hard work of Emmanuel and his team, he deserves another round of applause. Cyprian team, let me have my seats up at the front. Well, let's hear some reactions. If you could turn the lights on, Audrey, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get some reactions. Allow me to invite onto the stage the Assistant Director of the National Probation Service. I'll call you out, and then as soon as the seats come up, then you can come up on stage. Say, I could read his extraordinary, extensive, powerful bio of the incredible reforms and the things that he has done in his time. 32 years of experience in probation, and where he's really focused on non-custodial measures in Kenya, and his background in social work. But what I really would love to say about Mr. Ketch is the following. that when you meet him, there is a level of, people who have joy inside, like their marrow is joy, even though they might not be happy at the time, but just, you can sense that there's just a lot of joy in this person. And I think to myself, this is what national treasure looks like. Because the direction of travel for the kind of work that we're doing is non-custodial sentencing. To have a gentleman such as this at the helm will really help to support the moving of custodial sentences for those of who are sentenced to non-custodial sentences. And under the care, supervision, training of national treasures such as this, then we know that the reform and the rehabilitation that is possible can happen. A round of applause for Mr. Okech as he comes up. Also, to come on stage, and this is the advantage and also the disadvantage of the MC knowing you, because when the MC doesn't know you, they can't gossip about you. Joanne Mutonga, who is a program officer at the ICJ, and as we've said and you've seen, the ICJ knows very well how to recruit the very best from amongst them, from amongst us in society, to ensure that the changes that we need are housed within the International Commission of Jurists. Jan please do come up. A round of applause for her. Lenson Jogu is in charge of administration of the Justice Program at the LRF. A round of applause for him as he comes up. And to two of our heroines, Emma Odhiambo and Beatrice Tekiara, whose stories you may already have heard a little bit about, but who I want to invite to come on stage, not as formerly incarcerated women. We have refused that, and thank you so much, Commissioner Jadida, for telling us to no longer use that, but as overcomers, as becomers, as powerful pioneers for the journey that is ahead. A round of applause for my entire panel. I will ask kindly that we have two people standing here, Audrey, that would be great, and one other person with the roving mics and with sanitizers. We still have COVID amongst us, and so that if we've got to pass the mics, then we are able to do so. So this will be a very short session, just with some reactions to the report and some thoughts, perhaps from each one of you. And I will start with you, Mr. Okech. 32 years of seeing the Kenya Probation Services unfolding. If we are to realize the aspirations of this report, given the numbers that you have seen, and given, more importantly, your own experience, what is it that we need to do to shift the minds of the judiciary, the police, even of society, from lazima afungwe ndio ajue to turekebishe kwa haki without taking them into the prisons?
Thank you so much, Rene, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege. My name is Clement Okech. I'm a Deputy Director at Probation and Aftercare Service. I've been in this business for a very long time, and I love it so much. The piece that you're talking about, the passion one, like you rightfully said it, is in me. And I'm really happy that a clean start, I started it clean. When we met, or when I met Teresa, those years when she was starting, I think it was just about a year or so when she started this program, I didn't know it could go this far beyond Kenya. But most importantly, and coming now to the subject matter, we have had very many studies been undertaken. And Clean Start has added to that basket, where we have reports, we have initiatives, but those initiatives perhaps do not see the light of day. They grind somewhere. But if you may ask yourself, why do they grind somewhere? It is because we all, whichever sector, whichever space you are in, you lack the impetus to make it happen. You are not passionate about exactly what you do. If all of us could be like Clean Start, I think we could move mountains. Coming down to the real issue, criminal justice policy in this country, if you ask me, is still, and especially penal policy, is still undefined. In other jurisdictions, whenever there's a change of leadership in the control of this country, every sector, every instrument of government relooks at itself, re-examines itself. Why would we waste, since I was born, all that time without revising the Prisons Act, for instance, the Probation Act, for instance, the Criminal Justice Procedure, for instance? So that right now, if you look at the Criminal Justice, the Criminal Procedure Code and the Penal Code is an hackneyed, battered document that really does not represent the new aspirations of the new millennium that we are in. And I must say that the best way to implement this process, such a document, the results from such a study, is to start examining instruments that go against those new studies that have been done. And therefore, we will not do much if advocacy is not pointed towards looking, and one of the recommendations I like which has come on this, is re-examining the Criminal Procedure Code, particularly with a view to making it responsive to such designs that we are having. If I may just take one more minute, I don't know how much time I have because I can talk for ages. There's a time we were working with the Law Society of Kenya. It was a program funded by the Canadians, and it involved Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. It was called Strengthening Access to Justice for Children and Youth in East Africa. My friend Sylvia was with me in that program. At that time, she was still working with LSK. And one of the recommendations that we had made just before the program collapsed, and indeed it did collapse, was that we needed to re-examine the Criminal Procedure Code with a child's lens and examine whether those procedures really fit the processing of children. Because the Children's Act then, and which has now just been replaced, did not meet the requirements and could not match the tenacity in which the implementers or the users of that document relied upon that document. And therefore, one of the recommendations to examine the Criminal Procedure Code with a child's lens and see whether, because that is the main document that we use in prosecuting children. The same should be able to be applied to the current document that we are having. We need serious legal researchers to examine that document against the background of such studies, to examine whether, to what extent does it affect, infringe on rights and does not allow women and many other vulnerable persons to enjoy their freedom and their rights. Finally, on this subject, I've been in this space for a very long time, like I've said, but you cannot make things good when you only tackle it from one front. We have been concentrating too much on prison, working with the people in prisons. When you talk about making a recommendation, and thank you so much for making recommendation on funding our department. By the way, every research report, every document that has been presented always speaks about the underfunding of probation service. And that's a real fact. However, this same department has now become the fulcrum around which the criminal justice system currently operates. I will tell you, it is me who introduced the current bail processing system where probation officers get involved to inform the judicial officers on aspects related to women, children, and other inadequacies that make people commit offenses so that they could be given proper bail that would commensurate and would ascertain their coming to court. And that was way back, started that with Jedida, came to in my support, and that's why we even came up with the bail policy guidelines. To what extent have we been able to do that? Why have we been able to translate that policy guidelines into legislation that would be able to govern bail decision making in this country? We don't have the impetus to push that to the next level. And you cannot work, just like I said, the prisons, and you forget the alternatives. Where are you taking these people? Is probation service adequately funded, capacitated to be able to absorb more? Do we have what that takes? I was surprised many a times, and I was surprised many a times when I talked to young millennials about, do you know something, probation? A month ago I was in Nakuru, and we shared a talk with a lady from, I think, the Housing Department, National Housing Construction Authority. And then I introduced myself, then she said, I told her that I work with probation. Do you have probation in Kenya? And this is as an engineer. I asked her, you've never heard about it? I've only seen it movies and read in the books. I said, but we have been in this country since 46. Well, probation does not need to be known and publicized and all that. But it's the results of our work that needs to be known, and that will make people know us. So give us the opportunity to work with more people, and of course to use instruments of research, evidence-based research, to be able to correct the persons who are brought to us. And the naming that Jedida proposed, in other jurisdictions, they are calling them service users. They have changed the nomenclature. They're now calling them service users. They no longer call them inmates or prisoners or like that. So it depends on which space you are in. They're all enjoying your services. Thank you.
I think we've just noted the language, and thank you so much for that, and also for the work that you've done. Emma, I want to come to you first. Emma Odhiambo, your lived experience includes coming in conflict with the law because of hawking without a license. There's an element of the counties and the county revenue mechanism that is inadvertently criminalizing people who are going out every day to find or to make a living. But the result is devastating on the person who has to be charged or sentenced to 10,000 shillings or 3 months in prison. Imagine the cost of the wares of the women who you're buying from. Could she find 10,000 shillings from there? Now we have fined 10,000 shillings or 3 months in prison. Be that as it may, given this report, Emma, what would you like to see come out of not just this report, but be different about how hawkers are dealt with, so that hawking does not end in prison? If you had a recommendation to make, what would be your recommendation?
Okay, I'll speak in Kiswahili. Habari yenu. Naitwa Emma Odhiambo. Nilishikwa kwa hawking town. Wenye nilitoka kawaida nikienda kutafutia watoto wangu, nilienda nikashikwa huko. Watoto wangu walibaki wakiteseka huko because they were expecting me to be back na wakuniona. So I was dragged into that pickup, I don't know, Land Rover, whatever, taken to City Hall, charged 10,000. That is fine. Sikuwa na hiyo pesa. Kwa sababu sweet hawezi pata 10,000. That is what I was selling in town. So, nikakuja nikapelekwa Lang'ata. I've been to Lang'ata. I was in Lang'ata for, is it 1 week? It is 1 week, but it was 3 months imprisonment. So a friend just came to the rescue kwa sababu aliona watoto wanateseka. It was a double tragedy. Siku nilishikwa ndio siku baba watoto wangu pia alikatwa na wezi. So it was just a double tragedy. Ako si Lang'ata, ako si Kenyatta, bibi ako Lang'ata. So watoto walikuwa wanateseka. A friend just came to my rescue, akakuja akanilipia, and I was out. So kitu ningependa wafanyie watu wenye wako wanafanya hawking, hafai kukuwa charged, because mtu ameenda kutafutia watoto wako. Huwezi fanya hawking kama unasikia vizuri. Umeenda kutafutia watoto wako, so unafaa tu uongeleshwe, then they find another solution for that. Because tukiwa pale prison and we are out, mtu akikuona uko hapo nje, mtu hatajua ulishikwa kwa hawking, hatajua ulifanya kitu kingine kubwa, hata uliua mtu. Ukiona mtu unaenda aside, watu wanatengana na wewe. So that is what I can say, because for me it has been hard in my life, because hiyo kushikwa ilichange maisha yangu, kwa sababu sikuwa nataka kurudi niuze sweet tena ndio tena nishikwe nirudi nirudi ndani. So at least Clean Start coming to my rescue, amenifanyia maajabu kwa sababu sahi ukiniona, I'm a carpenter by the way. I've undergone training of carpentry and joinery through Clean Start at Build Her. So I'm a carpenter, trained, having a certificate. So mimi naweza sema mtu akishikwa kwa hawking, they find a better solution. Si kushikwa kupelekwa ndani, because hata ukimpiga fine ya 10,000, ana hiyo 10,000. So option ya kaya hapo, amalize kifungo yake through suffering, not knowing huko nyuma watoto wake wanateseka. Maybe she's a single mother, maybe yeye ni dad peke yake analisha watoto wake, bibi hayuko. So wanafaa kuangalia saa zile anashika huyu mtu mwenye ako na petty offenses, huko nyuma kukoaje, ndio at least solution ikuje. Kwa sababu maybe I'm lucky nimepata solution through Teresa, but so many people hawana solution. So that is it.
And I think you can begin to see the linkages between what Clement is saying about supporting, strengthening the probation services, seeing what is the pathway out. From Hawking, should we have been training them and increasing their skills, in fact, so that they don't have to be on the street? Because no one in their right mind, like Emma said, you don't go to sell sweets on the road because it's your pastime or it's your career progression plan. It really is not. So rethinking what is possible. And John, I want to come to you because, first of all, the ICJ has really supported not just this research, but a lot of research, a lot of reforms, a lot of opportunities for us as a country to change directions and to align ourselves with the aspirations that we have for ourselves as a country and for our people. How do you see this particular research informing the reforms that need to happen in this country?
Thank you, Renee, for that question. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate Teresa and her team. This is quite a very informative report. And one thing we usually say at ICJ, where there's evidence, then there's the likelihood of change. So this is what this report has brought forth. Evidence of the human rights violations meted out against women and men who try to earn a living on a daily basis. I would like to acknowledge also, allow me, the presence of Matthew Motiso. He coordinates the Mental Health Network in Kenya, and also the presence of Mr. Kimani, whom we've journeyed for over 6-7 years. Yes, he's standing. You can stand up again. Mr. Kimani, he's the Executive Director of City Streets Vendors Empowerment Support Program. And I tell you, for all those years, a week doesn't end before you receive a call from Mr. Kimani that a street trader has been arrested, has been assaulted, or has been abused, and that they would request us to post bail for them. So thank you also for the work that you're doing and the work that you continue to do. So as ICJ Kenya, we coordinate a national task force, the Civil Society Organizations Task Force on Petty Offenses. This task force constitutes representative groups from key populations. We work with persons with psychosocial disabilities, street traders, sex workers, gays and lesbians. We also work with the users and survivors of psychiatry. We work with persons living with HIV and AIDS. So this task force actually came up together because we were looking at who are the biggest targets of the enforcement of petty offenses within our cities, and it came out to be these key population representative groups. And one thing I'd say is that petty offenses has continued to be a problem that has grappled Kenya, not only here at the national level, but also at the regional level, which then has led to the development of the principles on the decriminalization of petty offenses by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And so this is a problem that emanated from laws, archaic laws, that were formulated by the colonialists while they were trying to restrict us. And therefore, as I went through this research, I was asking myself, over 50 years down the line, why do we allow ourselves why do we allow our fates to be decided by the colonialist regimes who came up with laws to restrict us? We're still talking about loitering. We're still talking about loitering with intent to commit prostitution. We're still talking about touting in the 21st century. And so, while this research will largely contribute and inform reforms, not only at the national level, these reforms are ongoing. We acknowledge that through the Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms, but more importantly at the county level, where reforms are actually urgent and needful, because we've seen the County Public Nuisance Act that was recently enacted by Governor Anne Kananu. This act is now being replicated in the county of Nyeri. This act will be replicated in another county. So county assemblies are developing, are replicating various statutes that are developed in various counties in their own counties. So this becomes a huge challenge for us as policy and legislative, while we're working on policy and legislative reforms, because while you're working to ensure that the laws within the Public Nuisance Act are decriminalized, there's another county that is also tabling a similar law before their county assembly. Why? Because they believe that this generates revenue for the county, but this is wrong. We need to address the socio-economic issues that exacerbate poverty in this country, and criminalization is not a solution. Hearing the story of the lady who's just spoken right now, there's a lady we've represented, Ruth Mukami. She said she's going to defend herself. We trained her, she went to court, and she was charged 6 times, brought before the Nairobi City Court 6 times for petty offenses, because all the time she went, represented herself, denied the charges, and the judge was saying we do not even have sufficient evidence to charge this particular woman. 6 different occasions. Last month, we also helped one hawker who was also arrested and refused to pay a bribe, and was released because he was being arrested for loitering. And the reason was, for dumping. The reason was because he failed or refused to give a bribe to a city askari. But also we must acknowledge that these city askaris do not have the requisite knowledge on human rights. We also, as civil society organizations, while we're engaging the law enforcement agencies, being the national police, we forget city askaris. Most of them do not have education beyond class 8. And so you can't talk to them about human rights. They have no idea. Yes, we commend the NMS because they've opened an institution where they are training city askaris. But as civil society organizations, we also need not only to propel police and legislative reforms, but also contribute to the agenda of reforming our practices and attitudes towards petty offenders or potential petty offenders. You and I, we are potential petty offenders. And as you walk in the streets of Nairobi, you will always see that, I don't know if it's called the Mariamu car. If we start even from there, that car is an unroadworthy vehicle. Beginning from there, that's an unroadworthy vehicle. And so you find these women, in order for them to escape arrest, they have to have their children or their babies on their back. And so why are you punishing her for trying to earn a living? Why? So poverty is not a crime, and I want to once again say that this research will largely contribute to reforming and to the reform agenda on decriminalization of petty offenses, not only here in Kenya, but also in Africa. And we also see that women are the largest target, and they bear the biggest brunt of enforcement of these laws, because many women are out there trying to fend for their families. And because they're scared of being arrested, that's why you will find children are the ones who are hawking now, the PKs and the sweets, and their mother is in a corner somewhere. So is it a crime for me to earn a living just because you cannot come with policies and frameworks within which I may conduct my business? It's about time we decriminalize these offenses. Thank you.
So well said, indeed. And bringing those stories home, we know, perhaps theoretically, that once you go into the prison cycle, it's extraordinarily difficult to come out. It's extraordinarily difficult. It will take a combination of so many things around you, so much privilege, that your family accepts you back, that they have the wherewithal to support you and to grow you and to put you, it takes so much. Consider this, that when a woman goes in, even for a short-term sentence, her house will be locked. Do you know that padlocking? What do you think happens to her stuff? Think about your home that you left this morning, all the things that you left there that you expect to find tonight. What happens to her things? When she comes out, we will have rendered her poorer than when she went in addition to having imprisoned her. And it's to you, therefore, Beatrice, that I come, because, Beatrice, your story is the live story of that once you go into that system, coming out is very difficult. And when we see what we call, or used to call, perhaps I can now adopt the new language, multiple service users. In other words, people who have gone into the system once, come out, been unable to stand up on their own, been caught again, gone back in. If you think about that woman who has been charged 6 different times, had she not the wherewithal to defend herself, she can come out for 3 months and she's back in again, isn't it? Beatrice, kwa kifupi, I just want you to presence in the room what it takes to be able to be free of that cycle of prison, outside, trying to stand up, getting caught again, prison, outside, trying to stand up and getting caught again, so that we really understand that these stories are not theories and they're not numbers. They're human beings with hopes, aspirations, and children.
Habari zenu nyote. Kwa majina naitwa Beatrice Tekira. Mama, nilianza kusikwa 2002 kwa kosa ya stealing. Ngaenda prison kwa mwaka mmoja. Kamaliza miezi 8 nikarudi. Watoto walikuwa wanaenda shule, lakini wakati nilisikwa hawakuenda shule. Wakakaa, bila nilitoka. Nikajaribu tena kufanya kazi hapo. Wakarudi shule. Nafanya kazi, narudi tena naiba, nasikwa narudi ndani tena. Sasa ikakuwa ni kama mtindo. Nikiwa huko prison, hakuna kazi nilikuwa nafanya, ni kazi nilikuwa napewa ni ya kuosha choo. Navumilia tu natoka. Kutoka huko nje sina mtu ya kunisaidia. Sasa mtindo lakini ikafika wakati mtoto yangu akawa mkubwa 20 ndio nilipelekwa prison. Kisha akarudi akanifungulia salon. Ndio sasa niko hapa. Hata watoto walikuwa wamenikataa, nimewaipisha. Nimewalipia masomo yao. Yenyewe nimepitia mengi. Wakati mwingine nikaacha mama yangu hapa Nairobi akiwa mgonjwa. Nikaenda nikaiba, nikashikwa, nikapelekwa Lang'ata. Kesho yake mama alifariki. Nimepitia mengi lakini Mungu amenisaidia. Niko mbele yenu naongea saa hizi. But this time naendelea vizuri, Mungu amenichalia, niliwacha wizi. Sasa niko na mali nafanya. Naomba Mungu tu anipe nguvu ili niweze kusurvive. Ile maisha nimepitia, prison sio kusuri. Nimeitwa machina, jailpan, sina makao, sina hata watoto. Hata nikiambia mtu niko na watoto wanauliza, wewe unashinda jela saa ngapi umelea watoto? Anyway, nashukuru Mungu kwa haya yote nimepitia, lakini I thank God niko sawa saa hii. Naomba tu mniweke tu kwa maombi. Ni hayo tu.
To see ourselves beyond the things and the circumstances, the places, the times, the events that have caused us to make the choices that we've made. If Beatrice told you the entirety of the story that led to that life, the injustice would be on us, not on her. And this is why this conversation must prevail. Our very last question is to you. I think you will close us out. Lenson, we need legal representation. I know the LRF has done quite a number of things, and you work specifically around advocacy. But how do we ensure that while the ICJ is training us on how to defend ourselves, we actually have legal representatives who are there, present in defense of petty offenders who are brought, to raise the standard to one of beyond reasonable doubt, not generally mko wangapi, and that becomes the reason for the sentence. Mko wengi sana, kila mtu 10,000. How do we practically put that in place? And this one will be our last question.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I hope it's afternoon now. Yes, good morning. Well, the question of legal representation, I think, is one that is asked at this particular moment. And my answer to that is that this is a journey that the country we walked for a very long time, acknowledging the fact that we had, and we still do, have a limited number of legal practitioners, and especially lawyers who are in active practice of representing people. The two, what alternatives needs to be there, and that's where the discourse of having paralegals being in place. And three, the discourse of asking ourselves where there are no paralegals out there in the civilian life to support in the prisons, how do we support those persons who are either convicted or in pre-trial, get to understand the legal procedures and become paralegals and help their colleagues be able to self-represent. Having said that, how do we get there? The first thing for me is strengthening what we already now have, the question of the National Legal Aid Service. We have a National Legal Aid Service that is embedded in law, the Legal Aid Act, but then how far have we gone to strengthen it in terms of budget? We want, and we have said, and the Chief Justice, for example, I will cite the directions he has given, that every child needs to be represented. But when you go to the ground, vitu kwa ground is different. The advocates tell you we would want to, but there are certain impediments. Budget question. That, and I'm happy that the director for the CEO for National Legal Service is here. As much as she would want to support most of the lawyers in here, she doesn't have the capacity. Two is the question of recognition of the place of paralegals within the justice system. This is an area that we still continue to discuss, and I'm happy that there is a conversation around there. And I think the advocacy effort is to ensure that we rightfully put the place of paralegals in the question of legal representation, because it's not every other place you'll be able to get an advocate to be able to represent you or the other person. Then the third element is handling the legal handles that exist. Allow me to cite, for example, some of the requirements that have been put in place, and this is what I've received from the pro bono lawyers, that they require to pay a fee of 10,000 shillings to be able to be recognized as legal aid providers in this particular country. For them, the question is, why do I have to pay for that particular fee, yet I've already paid for the certificate being an advocate in court? Yet I'm supposed to be giving pro bono or free services. So why do I have to pay? Basically, the question is, why do I have to pay to give services for free? So those legal handles need to be looked into. I think the fourth question for me in terms of ensuring that the legal aid system in this country is in place is recognition of the contribution of the various other sectors. Because legal aid is not directly having a lawyer representing in your court. And this is where I'm speaking to the question of the whole of government. We right now talking about alternatives to justice systems. How do we appreciate that we can use mediation as an alternative to that particular process? And there comes the place of a mediator, yeah, in terms of solving a legal question. How do we appreciate that some of these questions are about social support? How do we appreciate the fact that out there are different efforts being put all around for that particular essence? So for us is to rethink the legal aid system in Kenya. And lastly, for me, is the question, the new narrative of the public defender office. In this country, really, that has not been really clarified. I appreciate the fact that the DPP is thinking about it, civil society are thinking about it, LSK is thinking about it, NLAS is thinking about it. So let's engage on how to build a strengthened public defender office. But before I pass the mic, allow me to say two things, kindly, within the time. I appreciate the work that Clean Start has done, and Dr. Wanyonyi, really kudos. So let's clap for Dr. Wanyonyi and his team. I happen to sit in the committee referred to as the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms. That is headed by Lady Justice Ngenye, who was now yesterday crowned Court of Appeal judge. And I also sit in the sentencing committee that has been formed under that committee. That National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms, we are looking at two major things. The first question is the question of review of the criminal procedure and the penal code. And I'm happy some of the members, I see Sylvia here, I see Julie here and others around here. This report by Clean Start is timely. Timely in that some of the recommendations that we're perusing through the document are actually some of the things we are grappling with. My sister Joanne spoke about where there is evidence, there's a probability of getting solutions to that. Two, when you go to page 98 of that report that you are holding, Dr. Wanyonyi and his team have clearly stipulated areas that needs to be considered in the question of sentencing in Kenya. One of the major recent output that is required of us by the Chief Justice is to come up with a reviewed sentencing policy guidelines in Kenya. This is a commitment I'm giving that we are going to come back to Clean Start and Dr. Wanyonyi to interrogate further the recommendations that in that particular report, so that then we can also be able to give the sentencing policy guidelines the gender lens that they deserve, and more precisely, narrowing down to the question of women and sentencing in this particular country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lenson, and thank you very much indeed all of our panelists. I'll invite you to take your seats now. A round of applause for them as they do. Thank you for the reactions to the report. And now I'm left with one very happy task, to invite our board chair, to invite our founder and CEO, Teresa Njoroge, to invite our guest of honor, to officially launch a representative from the ICJ, of course, to officially launch what I'm so happy to hear is a seminal research and report that will change the face, change the way in which we deal with criminal justice and particularly with sentencing. While they come up onto the stage, please, our guest of honor, Julie, I want to acknowledge other people who are in the room who are here because they heard the clarion call, left what they're doing and came. The Rotary Club has forever supported whenever we have asked for anything. And I'm so glad to see my president. As a lawyer, I have many presidents. So I want to acknowledge the presence of the president of the Rotary Club of Karen. Please stand up, President Lorraine. I also want to, thank you so much. I want to acknowledge, I think she's left Benda Kithaka, or has she just stepped out? Breast cancer awareness, always happy to come and do our screening and to support the women and the children and indeed the men as well. Sippy, I'm going to ask, oh, excellent, there we are. And I'm going to ask if everyone would have the report with them to hand, or if you can lend them a report. I shall grab mine too. We promise to return them. Pastor Angie, who has always stood with us. Teresa, I think it's to you to speak to this moment. Really, is she not the star of this whole day?
Oh my goodness, what a moment. Words are not enough to describe this moment right here. And I finished my TED Talk by saying, I stand as one, but I stand as 10,000. And indeed, I come as one, but stand as millions. Some of whom are right here with us, women who have resiliently continued to push for justice, to say that there can be a better way to implement justice, some of whom's stories you've had right here, who are just a representation, and some of others who you saw here, who have traveled to come for this launch, as formerly imprisoned women who represent their communities back in the counties they come from. But this truly is a win for imprisoned women in this country, formerly imprisoned women in this country, and our children, families, and partners, most of whom are here today to celebrate this moment with us. Thank you so very much. Indeed, change is possible, justice is possible, and no one is the worst thing that they ever did. It's truly a moment that we can't put into words, but truly, asanteni tena sana. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Allow me to do a little bit of rearranging for this particular part. No, this is not for everyone else. Yep. Dr. Pat, if you could stand here. Teresa, if you could be next to Dr. Patricia, I think that would be so awesome, because I think it is the two of you who, Dr. Pat and Commissioner Teresa, I think we want to make sure that our gentlemen on each side are prisons. Please, I'm calling you prisons. But if you would be so kind as to come and stand next to, yes, I'm also trying to work out the gender dynamic here. And also the outfits, because they're such lovely ones. Pastor Angie, can I get you to come and stand here? Now we've got too many men on that side, but I think that we will survive. Yes. How does that look for our camera people? Have we now worked it? Do we need to take a step back? Yes, I will put myself somewhere. Are we good? And I shall stand on this side. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
It's balanced.
And because this research project would not have been possible were it not for the Ford Foundation believing in us, opening the doors for us, and funding us to carry out this research, I kindly request Ms. Susan Karaoke On behalf of the Ford Foundation, please join us as we launch this report. Thank you very much, Susan. Karaoke.
No wonder I'm missing agenda. Yes, you're my agenda number. You know, if we get arrested here, I think we will invite your ED to join us. The executive director is being shy. You will have many photography opportunities, sir. Now we will send you that side. It takes many hands to till a garden. We actually bought golden scissors for this moment, so we will pass them on to our guest of honor, who together with Teresa will cut our ribbon for us. Let's negotiate that part. Come, bring the scissors. I think from memory, and then whenever you cut something, you will remember, this is the symbol for change the system.
It's real good. I come as one
And stand as 10,000.
Can we say that? I come as one
And stand as 10,000.
Let's begin quoting ourselves. In memory.
It was actually Maya
Maya
Angelou, the
Angelou.
great Maya Angelou, who said that. Yes.
Let us celebrate.
Thank you ever so much. I'll ask you to take your seats and invite Teresa to give a vote of thanks and to close us.
Oh, 21st of July, 2022. What a moment. I know we're running short of time, and I truly wouldn't want to give the vote of thanks alone. Reason being, we all know too very well that I want to quote Henry Ford's quote, "Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, working together is success." If you know you're a clean start woman, whether you're working on the team or you're a formerly imprisoned woman, please come onto the stage and let's give this vote of thanks together, because you women know where we have come from. And it hasn't been a joke. We've lost some of our sisters along the way, but we have come this far. And so let's honor this moment, yeah? So formerly imprisoned women, members of the Coalition of Formerly Imprisoned Women, please come to the podium. I'd love us to give us this vote of thanks on behalf of our sisters who are still behind bars and the communities we're representing, because these women today have come here, some from different parts of Kenya, to represent the counties where our other constituencies are. Amazing. Thank you very much. Now, if you've been following our social media, you would know that we're now, you know, according to the this year's Break the Bias, we are extending our hands to our brothers. And so, yes, we have done some training at Industrial Area Prison, and we hope to continue, you know, training the men as well. But we are also embracing men in the team. So where is Jonah, the one and only man who has joined the Clean Start team? Thank you so very much. Well, this is the team, part of the representation of the team that works so hard day and night, you know, in this movement of ours to change the narrative. They are leaders in their own right, whether they wake up every day to work in the team or wake up to, you know, inspire the women in the counties, wherever it is that they have come from, on a daily basis, to say to them that we still can move forward, you know, because we all need community and no one can do it by themselves. Thank you very much for coming. So first, we would like to thank God, for he has really gotten us far. Yes. He truly, truly has. And our families who have stood by us. Secondly, would love to thank Kenya Prison Service. My goodness. The place that was meant to really tear us apart and break us. But look at us, Madam Olivia Robel, Director Mwakazi, please stand, Madam Vane Kerubo. Madam Vane Kerubo. My goodness, this lady. You should have been here, Madam Vane, with us. She stood with us, by us, you know, helping us bring up our little children, because most of us were in prison at Langata Women Maximum Prison. Madam Vane, I hope you're proud today to see how far we've come. Thank you for the amazing work you did as a welfare officer. Director, Offender Correction and Rehabilitation, Madam Olivia Obel. Thank you so much for the continued support that you accord us, believing in us that, yes, though formerly imprisoned, we can, you know, partner with the State Department, Correctional Services, Kenya Prison Service Department, and rehabilitate with yourselves together. We truly appreciate it. Thank you very much, Director Legal, Mr. Mwakazi. We sincerely appreciate you coming. We've journeyed together, and today representing the Commissioner General of Prisons means a lot. Asante sana. Kenya Prisons, hoye! Hoye! It's an institution of change. State Department of Corrections, the Permanent Secretary Office, that was represented by Heidi. State Department of Corrections, National Probation, Deputy Director Clement Okech. Thank you so much for the amazing support you accord us. And I also saw your colleague, Deputy Director Isaiah Munywa. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate the support we get from the National Probation and Service. Apostle Angela Murenga, Kingdom Business Solutions, there is no way we would have made it without the support, love, mentorship, spiritual nourishment that you offer us, and our imprisoned women and sisters who are still behind bars. The mentorship means a lot. Thank you so very much for journeying with us and the time and sacrifice that you give. We really appreciate it. Our special chief guest, Commissioner Jedediah Warohio. When we came to you and said, we want to do a research, you didn't ask many questions. You cleared your calendar and you met us. And I remember we had just had a meeting with Renee Ngama, our board director, and you started us off on this journey, including introducing us to people who would support us and assist us. And today, as we launch, again, you cleared your diary to come and launch this with us. Thank you so very much, Commissioner Jedediah. Thank you. Your support is phenomenal. Thank you very much. We really, really appreciate it. I want to thank the Strathmore Law School. Thank you very much for hosting us today. Strathmore Clinic, Dr. Jane Wathuta, the academic director. Thank you very much. Heidi, I see you. Thank you. Thank you. The law students who attended today, and Patrick Nzomo, the faculty director. Thank you so much for the support that you have accorded us. We know this is just the beginning, and we will continue working together to work on the recommendations and so much more. Yeah. When I was thanking the PS office, I hadn't noted that Heidi Muma was just seated right there. Thank you so very much. We appreciate the Permanent Secretary's office support. It means a lot to us. CEO, National Legal Aid Services, Ms. Flora Bidali, thank you very much for joining us along this journey. We appreciate the support coming from the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice. U.S. Department of Justice, OPDAT, Ms. Agatha Kingori, thank you very much for the continued support. Dr. Wanyonyi, Evidential Research, thank you for the depth and the nights and to bring this research to light. We really appreciate it. It's just the beginning of a journey. FIDA Kenya, my goodness me, Cynthia Limo, thank you for coming. FIDA Kenya has represented us. Actually, I got my clearance through FIDA Kenya. So really, really appreciate it for the justice that you continue to offer the women. NCAJ, National Council on the Administration of Justice, CUCs, represented by Sylvia Yantet. Thank you very much for all the support that you continue to accord us. Kenya Pediatric Association, Dr. Migoa, Africa Early Childhood Network, Dr. Owino, with whom and other stakeholders, we're about to launch the child care policy. This means a lot. Dr. Owino, thank you. The support is just overwhelmingly incredible. Kenya Prisons, I'm sure, appreciate that as well. Kidogo, thank you for coming on board for us to take care of our little children who accompany mothers to prison. Africa Development Bank, Winnie Motai, thank you very much. Faraja Foundation, Christine Odera, this lady. I remember just coming out of prison and holding my little baby and trying to understand how the discharge boards work. And she said to me, don't worry, bring your child. And she held my son and helped me attend the discharge board and made me comfortable as a formerly imprisoned woman. Thank you so much. Faraja Foundation, we've come a long, long way. And we always remember the soap from Father Peter. Thank you. Prison Fellowship, Mr. George Karemia, Executive Director, Prison Fellowship Kenya, thank you so much. And your colleague, Jerry Kiriani, thank you so much. This means so much for us to see you here. KCB Foundation, Teddy, Oracha, where are you, gentlemen? Thank you. We are so grateful when we see the banks leaning in. Having come from the bank, it's so good that now we're joining hands. to do the necessary reforms that are needed. Incoming Executive Director, Legal Resource Foundation, Mr. Esau Riaro, thank you very much for making time this morning. And to Lenson Jogu, who has always accorded us the support that we require as a community. Thank you very much. I mean, the list is so long. Ladies, can you see how many people came to celebrate with us, who are joining hands with us, which means we can go so much further. Daikonian, Sweden, Irene Miner, thank you. Kilele Health, Benda Synergy, Samantha Tunawiri, Charity, we see you. Thank you very much. Krevit Mulia Yvonne, Felicia Mburu from Article 48, thank you very much. Our friend from Narpok, thank you very much for attending this morning. We appreciate it. Evangel Publishing,